Alrighty, everyone. So I think we have most people in. I'm sure people will still trickle in. But welcome to this week's AI Exchange Friday. We're obviously so glad to have you here. If you have not been here before, AI Exchange Fridays is our weekly member event. The format of these changes to keep things interesting and mostly to keep creating events that you guys are asking for. And as I mentioned, we've heard the requests loud and clear. Many of you guys have been asking to see more real world demos and examples of AI in action. So that's exactly what we're building today. We have 3 of our members are like pulling back the curtain on their systems and showing us how they built and deployed their own systems inside their companies and at work. So I really think that wherever you are when it comes to AI operations, whether you're a visionary, an AI operator, or maybe you're deep in the weeds of implementation, I think you're really going to walk away with a lot of ideas, inspiration, and some fresh ways to think about your own AI ops journey. Are you excited for that? Do you feel good about what we're going to do? Perfect. I see thumbs up, nods. I love it. Cool. So today we have some focus demos lined up. And I do see some of our presenters here already, which is great. I think I see Grant and Laura. Let me see. There's so many of y'all in there. I'm going to see if I can find, is Stacy here? If you guys are here, if you know you're presenting today, you can write here in the chat. That would be super helpful. Laura, I see you. Perfect. Grant, awesome. Perfect. Everyone's here. Great. So what's going to happen today is that each presenter is going to have about 10 minutes to walk us through their setup. Then we're going to have Q&A open for about 5 minutes. I'm sure there's going to be so many more questions that we can possibly tackle in our time together, but that's why we have Slack, right? So if you're really interested in something that someone did, please reach out to them in Slack or start a new discussion in Slack. So then we'll have 5 minutes and then we'll wrap up the hour with a few reflections and some open mic time if we have it. So first off, let's go with Grant. Grant, do you mind coming off mute?
There we go. Can you guys hear me?
Awesome. Yes. Saw you thinking about it. Perfect. So Grant, I think I would love for you to kick off. And before we dive into exactly what you built, can you do some simple framing for us here at the beginning, such as like who you are, what your role is within your company, and ultimately what problem or opportunity were you trying to solve with what you built?
Yeah, great questions. So great to meet everybody. My name's Grant Fuellenbach. I started a company called Go First Consulting at the beginning of the year, basically helping builders and remodelers adopt just better systems, better business practices. And we do a lot of that through practical AI. My background is actually in like VDC or visual design construction. So a lot of drone work, a lot of like BIM and 3D modeling. And so that's how I kind of became very familiar with the space of both commercial and residential construction. And then kind of the impetus of the company was actually back before the holidays. So prior to this, I had started a separate drone company, basically connecting project managers with pilots. But I was at Costco with my fiance and we were walking in and she noticed just how many contractors and builders trucks were in the parking lot on I think it was like a Tuesday afternoon too. And I was like, huh, well, that is a market I'm super familiar with. And, we live in Fort Collins in Colorado, so it's a relatively big town, but, it's nothing like Denver or any like Boston or anything. And I was like, that TAM is ginormous, the total addressable market. And it just kind of clicked for me that, these guys are phenomenal craftsmen, great builders, super talented in their own right. But when I dove into it, it's just, it's an industry that people need a lot of help in. And so, yeah, I got to work kind of building out what it would look like, where the biggest gaps are in that industry. And since then, I've been busy kind of helping to bridge them.
I love that. So do you want to go ahead and talk about what you built?
Yeah, totally. Can I share my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
So I built a our business runs off of a 3-step process. Sorry, let me just click this. There we go. Can you guys see the website?
Yes,
Or
looks
one
great.
of them? Okay. Excellent. And so the 3-step process, it's nothing new. A lot of like consultants or coaches or anybody who's started a company on this group is probably familiar with it. But the first step is basically doing a diagnosis, so an assessment of where they're currently at. I do this a little bit differently though, because it's not a 5-minute quiz. It's like it takes about 75 minutes. But through that, I vet people who are actually the right type of company for the services I provide. And then in depth, I get an understanding of their tech stack, their org chart, their challenges, their P&L, their goals, the whole story, the whole kit and caboodle of what makes them tick. And then what I do is I basically take that framework or that synopsis and I feed it into an AI model that helps me understand risk assessment. So are they on pace to reach their goal? 99.999% of the time they're not, if they're in conversations with me. And then it also helps me identify kind of like the breaking points. So they might have a really expensive CRM or a construction management tool in place, but maybe it's not being utilized as effectively, things of that nature. So then I do an assessment review, basically showing them what the cost of all of these gaps are. And then I enroll them if they want to move forward with me, I enroll them into phase 2, which is my map or a mutual action plan. And that's essentially what I'll be showing you guys today. And that is a 6-module toolkit, if you will, basically where we walk through 6 categories or 6 topics, everything from like lead flow, admin work, all the way down to like talent and subcontractor management. And so this was all built using the portal, which is where the map is hosted, is actually built on Gamma, if you guys are familiar with that tool. And so each module has a toolkit, AI assets included, and then a notebook. And so the toolkit is built on essentially vibe-coded web apps that I've built using a tool called Zeit, which is kind of relatively unheard of in this vibe coding space of like Cursor, Windsurf, everything, Replit. But Zeit is actually really neat because it's built from these guys who created a form called Fillout, and it's kind of like Typeform or one of those tools. But what it allows you to do is basically integrate natively to forms and all of the databases that you would already have if you're using forms. So Google Sheets, Supa, tons of different databases, right? As well as it's incredibly cost effective for what it allows you to do. Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to stop promoting Zeit for a second. So I have a handful of different tools that I've built out for each one of these modules, as well as I have essentially a handful of like partner tools. So different Chrome extensions, different other web apps that I've partnered with since I started. And then each tool, actually every single thing in here has a link to it where they can log in, start, using the tool, as well as a tutorial that I built out in Supered. And Supered is, I don't know if I still have it up. Yeah. So Supered is essentially a knowledge base that allows you to create tutorials or really tons of different things. But the biggest benefit I've found is actually their Chrome extension. I think it's called Sidekick. And what it allows you to do is essentially do a screen recording. But unlike a standard Loom or whatnot, it will actually create a tutorial of where you click on a page, what links you use, what you type in, and it will turn that into an interactive interface for leads or customers or even like internal employees if you're doing trainings. And so that has been, construction is, it's kind of it's a hard industry because there's lots of old dogs in it. And tools like Supered have been phenomenal for basically teaching those guys new tricks, right? Just because I can track engagement through the tool. I don't have to really like handhold because that Chrome extension actually does it for me in terms of telling them where to click, telling them what to type in, telling them what to bookmark, all of that stuff. So yeah, let me go back to that page. So then there's the toolkit has all the tools in it, and some of them are just like data, like scorecards, scoreboards, financial reviews, but all of the tools have AI capabilities into it. So like the critical 19, this is just a scoreboard for 19 different KPIs that I've found drastically are literally critical to a construction business's health. And what's cool about it is, if you're consistent with plugging that in every week before a meeting, the AI insight tool will actually tell you, trend analysis of if you're outperforming, if you're underperforming, and then what some suggested actions could be to take or to bring up on your meeting, as well as you can download it as a PDF. So then you can drop it into Notion or Notebook or whatever your knowledge base is. Then the AI assets, so this is probably the other part of it, is like most companies, even builders, are at this point very familiar with like ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, and they probably have a subscription to one, but they're just barely touching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to practical use. And so a lot of these are true like templated prompts that allow them to build out their own custom GPTs or whatever they're using. And these things are really in depth, like the topics and the questions that are in a master or weekly insight engine. It's not just like an umbrella or a blanket statement prompt. It's pretty in depth for the industry. And then so there's I think 15 different prompts that we use. And then we also use NotebookLM as a suggested or primary knowledge base or RAG. So that's linked here. And each module has a specific custom notebook. So all best practices that I found that relate to strategy and goal setting for the construction industry go into this notebook. And, it's just basically every week when I come across a new YouTube video or something that's practical or applicable to that, I'll drop it into that notebook. And so then by getting access to this toolkit, you get access to, the tools, the AI assets, as well as a custom knowledge bank with best practices all revolving around that module. And then this thing basically takes 6 weeks to implement. I take 1 hour a week and just walk them through, okay, this week we're going to go over lead flow. Here's the tools that you're going to get. Here's how to implement them. Here's how to, get consistent with using them. Here's, who's going to be the champion and driving this, all of that stuff. So we talk about adoption too. And then as well as like the AI assets, I show them, really I only have to show them once how to build out those custom GPTs or whatever they're using. But really, it goes pretty in depth into here's not just why it's or what it is, but literally how you want to be using this prompt or this custom GPT almost on a daily basis, right? To streamline different workflows or whatever it is that they need to be doing.
Yeah, this is all so impressive. I feel like AI is just throughout everything. I know that in the spirit of time, we'll have to keep it moving, but we do have questions that are coming in for you. So I think we go ahead and transition to that.
Yeah.
Claudia, you can go ahead and come off mute if you want, but I'll go ahead and like read yours just in the sake of time. She had asked how many people have gone through this so far?
So far, I've had 6 different companies go through this. I've essentially had it as a working model or a work in progress. I was making quick little iterations to it, but I think in its state right now, I'm pretty happy with it in terms of like the volume of deliverables and just what clients are getting out of it too.
Mm-hmm. I see Dr. Natasha Jordan. Her hand is raised. You want to come off mute and ask yours?
Yes. Hi, Grant. Thank you so much for taking us through this, and forgive me if you already shared about this. But given that the industry is fairly mature, meaning, we have a lot of guys who've been doing this for, since they were like 12 or 13. I'm being silly.
Yeah.
But how have you been able to come in and get their buy-in on something like this? Like in those first initial like sales calls and these 6 companies that you work with, they said yes, given that this is not even a part of their world. I'm just curious how you were able to do that.
Yeah, that's a great question. The number one way I found was actually so my background is like in drones and sales ops, and so I'm definitely familiar with like brand acquisition and just building out brands. Um, and I found a group called NAHB, which is the National Association of Home Builders. It's the biggest group for anybody who's in remodeling or residential construction in the US. And lucky enough, I just got pretty well versed with who's who in that group. And then I set a goal for every 2 weeks. I want to drop some AI enhanced value, usually through a way of a lead magnet into that group. So, I think the latest one yesterday was just an article about tech adoption and why that's such a challenge for construction and how to overcome that. But the one before it was actually a scorecard, and then the goal too is since we have these amazing tools at our disposal, I just like to build out different fun ideas. And so anytime I'll create an application that falls outside of this, I'll drop that in and say, I made this fun new tool for you guys.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Grant. I know there's a couple of follow-up questions for you here in the chat if you want to answer those. But you can also, for example, Mariana, I think there's Adam. Feel free to also connect with Grant in Slack. Thank you so much for sharing, Grant. This looks incredible.
Thanks.
I think we have Stacy up next. Stacy, do you want to come off mute?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Great to see you. Great to meet some of you. I know a few of you here already. A little bit about myself. I basically been a marketer by trade for many years in advertising agencies. And I felt like if we were to create an analogy of technology and me, it's like a big tidal wave and it's going to come crashing down on me. And I felt like I was constantly being chased by technology, and my job wouldn't be obsolete, but it was always kind of, in a bit of a transition or jeopardy or whatever. So I'm sure there's a lot of marketers here as well trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with this? Whatever feelings we have, whether it's fear, excitement, denial, or whatever, what do we do with that? So with that being said, I kind of November 2022 was when ChatGPT launched, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm a marketer. This is going to rock my world. So I learned everything that I could know about AI as best I could. I went to school. When I went to school, professional learning courses, because I was still working. So MIT, got certified by AWS as an AI practitioner, and then I was laid off. There we go, right? There, the tide kind of swept me away a bit. And I was working at a research and advisory firm in the marketing department there as a strategist. And I was just like, this is not going to get the best of me. I started creating agents with make.com and I started publishing them on LinkedIn just to kind of show that, okay, here I'm a marketer. What could I do with AI? And I started putting that on LinkedIn. That got me my next job, which I'm currently at right now at HFS Research. If you guys are familiar with research and advisory firms, they are in, again, a tidal wave is coming after them a bit. You've got McKinsey, you have Gartner, you have Forrester. I'm sure you know, they publish tons and tons of research. But now you got ChatGPT that is going in on consulting right now and going after 10 billion plus clients. And you've got deep research. So as a client, do you go to ChatGPT and get the research and advice you want, or do you stick with research and advisory firms? So what does a research and advisory firm do? And that's what I'm going to talk today about, what HFS Research did and what I launched with them. Is called, can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes, looks great.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So we launched Ask HFS AI. Ask HFS AI is basically, think of ChatGPT and we're like, yeah, okay, you can go to ChatGPT, but we are going to create our version of ChatGPT that's trained on all of our research and information and data that we have done in the last 15, 20 years. So I was the product lead on that. Again, marketers, I don't have the technical experience. I have courses that I've taken. So what do I do with that? And the need that is happening, and I think people that may not be technically there, is learn how to talk to the technical group and also talk to the business group. So that's what I played. I was the strategist and I was the coordinator between two incredibly important teams in order to get an agent live. So we built Ask HFS AI, and like I said, consider it like a ChatGPT that's just trained on, I think we now have 4,000 pieces of research in a server, in a bucket that the agent goes to. So I'll just do a quick little demo. We have suggested prompts. I'm just going to do that. So, and it's RAG. It's built on RAG. I'll show you how it is built in a second. Again, do let me know if my screen ever stops sharing, but if you can see it working. Here's the thing. You can see it taking a little bit of time. And here's the issue that we came up with, is that when you come up with an agent, you need accuracy and speed are two things that you want. And we had to constantly kind of figure out what is most important. For us, it's accuracy. And so what we built was an activity field. So when somebody comes here, they can kind of, see, it's taking a little bit longer on my computer, but it takes about 30 seconds on average to produce an answer. And so it shows the activity, but what it's doing right now is the agent is taking my question, it is going to a knowledge base, and it's pulling the data accordingly. So pretty straightforward for you guys. And there's the response there. And the goal is that your 24/7 concierge agent that is and to be honest, also our analysts and internal people use it regularly because the knowledge we have is very valuable for our clients as well, for internally. So here's the thing. Clients can come to us. They don't have to read a 20-page report. What they do instead is they ask a question that is important to them. The agent tries to understand that question and gets pieces from a bunch of different research in order to get the response they want. The next steps are, we're going to add podcasts, we're going to add video casts, we are going to add data, Excel docs and stuff like that. We're going to add more data to this as it goes. But the tricky thing is, and what I found the most fascinating, is data management. How do you organize your data? How do you instruct the agent to pull the right data when appropriate? And how do you organize that? So I'll just show you under the hood of what we built. Hold on a second. All right. Can you see the image? Yes. Okay. So this is, how we built it. Obviously, the user asks the question. We have a conversational agent. This is Claude 3.7. We found Claude to be the best when we did a bunch of testing on which LLM is the best when it comes to how they respond, accuracy, etc. So it goes to Claude, the conversational agent. Then it goes to our agentic RAG agent. That we used OpenAI for semantic search, meaning that, okay, the Claude is now talking to OpenAI and saying it understands the question, it's reiterating it for the semantic search agent. The agent then chooses, and they have to choose recent data because that's incredibly important for us, because when clients want the most recent information, and we realized when we didn't have this in place, it was prioritizing data from 2016 versus 2025. And that's not what we want. As an organization, we want to be, on the latest trends. So we prioritized recency is incredibly important, as well as relevancy. So we had to do a bunch of programming there to make sure that there's a balance. And then it goes to our S3 bucket in Amazon, which is our knowledge base. In between here is the metadata. The metadata was just fascinating to try to figure out. So think of a library that you walk into and you're overwhelmed. There's thousands and thousands of books, and you don't know where to start, but you know what answer or one question you want to get answered. So where do you go? You go to the computer and you type in what you want. And so we had to create a system and a database that documented and keywords and everything related to that. So kind of creating a card catalog. So that really helped with speed. You don't want the agent just to go to a folder that has 5,000, 4,000 pieces of research and say, go have fun. No, you want it to go first to a database that is easier to read and kind of can be a directory. And then you go to the large base. So it was really cool to try to figure that out and organize it when you are working with data that is changing, and how do you organize it? So that was fun, but also challenging because we really needed accuracy to be key here. Then obviously it goes back, and then the output, and we are now in the process of creating user analytics. So understanding what questions people are asking that can then inform our research moving forward, which is kind of really cool. What is important to our users? You don't get that from a general website, right? You only get that through sales. But here you're seeing the conversations that are actually happening. Obviously, we're SOC compliant, so we remove the names and address and everything to make sure that our clients are protected. But at the same time, you learn from your users and can inform future research and needs. So it's in market right now, as you saw. We put it on our website for free. A lot of our competitors in research and advisory are building these and trying to figure out how they can stay relevant in this space. I am not technology. Just one added thing is that I am not, I would say, not tech savvy. I don't write code. I can read it though. If you are like me and going through this transition as a strategist, partner with the right company. Find vendors that lean into, if you have a client or if it's your own business, what is the most important thing as it relates to agents? So when you reach a provider, we worked with Lizer, they lean into safe and responsible AI. You will find when you talk to different vendors, they lean into a different differentiator. So if you are going to partner with somebody else, really think about, don't just get the most popular one. What do they excel in the most, and match based on that. So I think that would be my recommendation. They're a pretty cool company. They're hand in hand with Accenture. To be honest, I'm actually going to start working with them. They hired me, so I'm now going to be the product lead for Lizer and working with a bunch of clients, particularly in the marketing department, to build agents for them. So yeah, I don't know if that's at time or not, but I kind of sped through it.
That's so perfect, Stacey. I think that was great. How amazing. I'm scrolling through. You have a couple, and if you have a question for Stacey, feel free to raise your hand as well. But Jolly asked, how do you look at this being different than researching directly on ChatGPT?
It's proprietary data, right? And so how was it different for me? It was, you can like, what is the most fascinating thing? I idolize Amanda, what's her name? She is behind Claude. And listening to her speak was like, this was her baby. She built Claude and it was her baby. And so what's different about this agent for me was that you could curate how it responds, the tone of voice and everything. And so how is it different than ChatGPT? It's its approach to how it's responding to your queries. Yes, I think to be honest, it's like it's still going to compete against ChatGPT, and it's subjective, but our clients might want information still from that's well researched, where ChatGPT is scraping the web, and what it pulls may not be validated, double checked, triple checked when it comes to a certain question that they want answered.
I love that. And I think you started to touch on it, but does anything else come to mind for you when Laura asks, I'm curious to know about the tech stack behind this? Is there
Yes.
any other tools that come to mind?
Yes. So we used AWS. AWS is a big partner with Lizer. So we used their entire Bedrock SageMaker, their whole tech stack, because of privacy and what they have in place. Found them to be the best partner for that. So if that answers your question, we use the S3 bucket. We use their, quick sites for analytics. Basically, yeah, they just kind of said, here's what we have, use it. And we're like, yes, please. So if you look at the AWS Gen AI tech stack, that's what we used.
I love that. Thank you so much, Stacey, for sharing all of that with us. I know you do have some follow-up questions from Amanda and Veronica here in the chat if you want to go ahead and take a look. And again, you guys are always more than welcome to also ping Stacey in Slack. All right, so we have our next presenter, Laura. I see you. Do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, those are so cool. I love nerding out on all of this. I love seeing those. I'm like, yeah, I have to talk about my thing and stop thinking about what they built. Cool. So a little bit of background, since you asked that in the beginning. My background is in creative production, so I've always been more on the creative side. But growing up, my dad was a network systems engineer, so he had me taking apart motherboards as a kid. So I always kind of loved that line between creativity and tech. So I got into video production and podcast production. I was a performer for a while. I was in an a cappella band. That's a whole other story. But it means that I've always been with creatives, and I had this aha moment when Midjourney came out and hearing the conversation between my friends and my partner, and they were disagreeing about sort of whether they thought it was ethical, certainly the way that Midjourney was trained. And my partner has aphantasia, which, if you haven't heard of it, is basically no mental image. Like if you say picture an apple, he thinks of keywords related to apples. He kind of thinks like ChatGPT. And so he loved Midjourney because for the first time, he called it like his prosthetic imagination. He was drawing D&D characters and mapping out worlds and having so much fun with it. And then my graphic designer friends and all of the creators in my lives were kind of freaking out and were pretty upset by how these models had been trained. So I honestly just felt like it was sort of my responsibility to be the person in other people's lives who understood and appreciated them being skeptical and thoughtful about how AI is developed and also how it's used. And after talking with all of the creatives in my life, I decided what I wanted to do was help them use AI for admin instead of for replacing their creative workflows. And we still, find parts of their workflows to speed up with AI, but I just found like a lot of creative people really hate all of the back office stuff. And so do I. So automating it got really exciting for me. And that's where I got the idea for this automation that I'm going to show you, which is basically creating a quote for when somebody submits a lead form. I first made this for a video production company. So I will share my screen, but quoting and making proposals was like one of the first things that I heard was a real issue for the creatives in my life. They would avoid it, they would put it off, they would take like 3 or more hours just to put together a proposal. And when I first built this, it was for a video production company that was even taking months to get back with a quote. Obviously a big problem. And they had plenty of work on their plate, they had plenty of leads, but because they were taking so long to respond, they were losing out on potential work. And they even had people who stopped referring them work because they said, you're going to take so long to respond. Like, I just assume that you're busy, so I stopped referring you work. And yeah, that's obviously not what you want. So I'm just going to show this working in action, and then I'll go under the hood to how I built it. I'm sure it's more simple than what the other two people showed here, but it's been really useful for me and for a lot of like agencies. So figured I would share it. So this is a form that you would fill out. Let's say John McDon is filling it out. You could either have your lead fill it out, or you could fill this out yourself during a first discovery call. It just depends on how you want it to work. And he works at Starburst Inc. I probably can't use an actual Starburst email because that might actually go to John. So let's say that John needs video production, and basically this quote is going to be based on all of the fields that John puts in here. It also uses conditional logic. So, because he selected video production, we're going to ask questions later about how long the video needs to be. Whereas, we wouldn't ask that if it was just photography. Put in a budget and a timeline, and then the delivery formats. And this can all be customized. So I'm actually working right now on releasing pretty soon a version of this that has a series of prompts that walk agency owners through actually creating all of the form fields that they'll need, the conditional logic, and then the actual quoting logic that I'm going to show you. So let's just say hero video should be 5 minutes, 10 clips for social media. Captions in captiones in English and Spanish, and check us out at starburst.inc. We use bright, happy colors and can't wait. This is our first hero video. Okay. So I'm using tally.so for this form. I just like it as a form builder, but this automation would work with anything like Google Forms or JotForm, whatever you want to use. As long as it has conditional logic, it should be able to do everything you want to do, by which I mean like hiding answers or hiding questions until they answer a certain way. So the automation platform that I use to build this, we can watch it go. It's called relay.app. It's one that I've discovered more recently. So I built something like this in other automation platforms, but I really like Relay for handing over automations to clients who want it to just work and don't want like an N8N automation soup type of interface. It's really simple looking, and actually the main founder behind it worked on the Gmail product for a long time, and they have a ton of native integrations, and it's just one of the more simple builders that I've used, but it still has most of what I need. You can still do custom API calls, and you can, add in code for certain steps and that sort of thing. You can have path logic, all that jazz. So the form submission came in, and basically what I get on the user end is a Slack message. So it's telling me that John has submitted a form for quote. I can go to his initial form submission, or I can just look at the drafted email in my inbox. So let me move our beautiful faces over here. So this, hello. So this is the drafted email. So it uses human sounding language, I think. So it talks about checking out the website and mentions, the brand identity, the fact that it'll be his first hero video. Based on what you've shared, a dynamic 5-minute corporate hero video and 10 shorter clips. So it understands what he asked for. It puts together an actual price quote. I always do this as a draft or a draft proposal if you're doing this automation for a proposal instead, which you totally could, because I don't believe in sending things straight from AI if they're this delicate. So it mentions everything that will include based on what he checked off, and it also adds in some things that it just knows about this team, how they deliver projects, English and Spanish captions, and then it gives a timeline. And my favorite part about this that I worked on is that the math actually maths on the production timeline. So 2 + 2 + 3 is 7, and I had to work that one out. And then it gives them a scheduling link and does the sign off. This is just obviously my automated sign off. Okay, so now I'll show you how that actually works in the editor. So when a new submission is received, it comes in from Tally. Again, this could be any form builder. The first prompt runs through O4 Mini because it's pretty cheap and accurate for this kind of thing. And it goes through this quoting logic. And like I said, this quoting logic could be different depending on every single company, basically. The way I first developed this was honestly through a very long debugging conversation with Claude. But now I have it to the point where I have this set of prompts that I give to people and that they go through, and it makes sure to ask all the questions that it needs to generate the form fields and the logic for that, and then another prompt to help them make this quoting logic. So for this particular video production agency, it has all the data just in these curly braces, so it just speeds up my time bringing in the fields in case I want to make changes. And then it's kind of a matrix, so it's like building blocks of how you price things out. Sometimes it actually helps people formalize their pricing when they sort of haven't yet and they're just going based off of vibes. So it starts with like a base price. So for a corporate video, if it has a social media package, then here's your base price to start with. And then it goes through all of those bases and then core service costs. So if they need pre-production, production, and so on. And then any add-ons. So like drone and aerial footage, it's going to add $800. Timeline modifiers, so there are extra fees for if they need rush delivery. Same for adding on additional platforms and special considerations. So it knows some of the special considerations that people might have just based on this agency's experience, like multiple shooting days. And then it goes through calculation example and output requirements. So it outputs in JSON, which made it easy for me to map all these fields. What's really nice about Relay also is that it will sort of auto-generate or auto-suggest your output fields. So because I had it output in JSON here, it was able to pick those out for me, but I did have to go through and like one by one sort of confirm them. That was actually the most manual part of this whole thing. And then it doesn't output the email, it outputs the core information to write the email. Things like rounding costs to the nearest $50, it has those special instructions, and the timeline should be realistic for the scope, so it has knowledge about what's a realistic timeline for this company for different kinds of scopes. You can also add other knowledge base here at this step. And then if the budget is mismatched in the email, that will actually get acknowledged. So I did this other test, for example, where it had a quote for 12.3K, and the client had put a 10K max budget. So when that happens, the next step will actually suggest a couple of things they could do, not to charge less, but to bring down the amount of work that the company is doing. So, simplify the motion graphics package and focus on more straightforward visuals. But if the budget is fine, then it just doesn't say anything about that. The next step is the prompt to Claude 3.7 Sonnet. It's my favorite writer. I gave it a lot of instructions about the writing voice. This is something I definitely worked on for a while to get it to not sound like a corporate presentation, but like an email that this human would send. So avoiding corporate buzzwords and overly polished language, it has like an example email, and then make sure that it has the right scheduling link, which is mine for this demo. And then one final reminder, you're talking to a colleague, not giving a presentation. And it has the AI output from the previous step, as well as the original form submission, just to make sure that everything is accurate. And then just creates the draft with that body. I kind of hard coded the subject line because I didn't like what it was generating. So just regarding production quote, and then you can also obviously change that. And then just send a message in Slack letting you know, yeah, that message I showed in the beginning. And it's been really working well for the clients that have been using it. So I'm happy that it is, because it's actually like one of the more simple automations. It's only really 2 prompting steps. The hardest part, I think, for setting it up is making the decisions about how you price. But then it kind of helps take that weight off going forward. So there is an initial setup, but saves you a lot of headache down the road.
Laura, this is so, so cool. I feel like the last thing you touched on is so interesting, which is one, your whole AI tool doesn't have to be complex in order to be useful. So it's like we don't have to overthink some things. It's like, how do you build something quickly that teams can use? And as we wait, I know I prompted people here in the chat on who has questions for Laura. I would like to ask you a question, Laura, which is on, you hinted on something that I think AI operators have to do the work for, which is what happens before you start building all of this, which is like, okay, you have to make some decisions on how you want to price. How did you navigate some of those conversations with the people that you built this for?
Yeah, it's funny that it really is the most difficult part. The automation is not that complicated, but pricing is often based off of some intuition. And so the first few times I built this, I actually did it on live calls with people where I talked through what informs their intuition. And we looked at, what they quoted for past projects and that kind of thing. Like I said, now I've got it down to those prompts, but that helped shape those prompts and everything that I would need to know to help them with that logic. And really, it came down to, what questions do you ask in a sales call or in a first discovery call that you have to have answered in order to create a quote? Because we know that if those are the questions you always ask, then somehow that gives you enough information to give a quote. So then it was breaking down like, okay, what are the vibes that you're going off of? Okay, I want to know their budget because I want to make it work. So I don't want to just give a quote into the open air. I'd like to have an idea of what they're working with. And then there is this sort of thing in pricing where you try to find that middle ground between what it's going to cost you internally to produce something and then what they have available. And yeah, I just think it was a difficult thing to work through for people, but then they seem to feel more relieved having it down on paper rather than we take 3 months to put a quote together because we don't actually know how we quote.
Yeah, no, I love that. I like, there's so much when it comes to AI on like, how do you get the vibes out of your process whittled down to actual steps and logic and decisions. And
yeah,
that's great. Alrighty, so we had some questions here in the chat. Todd asked, I noticed that you're using 04 Mini, which is a great model. Was there a reason you chose to use that one and not a smaller, faster, cheaper model?
Yeah. Yes, I would love to use a cheaper model at that step. And that is a really good question. I'm open to doing a cheaper model. I usually use smaller models for things like just separating out variables and that kind of stuff. But because I put all of the logic into one long prompt, which you could say is not the best approach, it's been working, so I'm fine with it. But because I put it all in one long prompt and I really want the model to be kind of thoughtful about how it is combining all of those factors and also maybe things that aren't explicitly in the prompt. Like those add-ons that I have already are from ones that this agency has seen before, but I want a model that can kind of think well about something new and factor that into the quote as well. And I mostly have built this for companies that don't have such a high volume of leads because they're more like boutique service agencies. It hasn't been a problem at scale. They're not getting like tens of thousands of lead submissions. So for me, the quality was more important. And Relay.app on the tier, I think it's like $25 a month, has up to 10,000 AI credits, and one run of this doesn't take more than 100. So with everything combined, it just hasn't been too expensive.
I love that. Let's see. I think there's some other questions. The chat is moving. I'm trying to find it. I think you answered that one on like how you decided what LLM you wanted to use. And I guess lastly, how is this helping your client so far in terms of benefit?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, some of them have this in a variation that is literally just like this email. that agency I built it for, they started using it in this email, and then they wanted to get more complex. So we're actually working on a version that takes in the input and then goes to 3 sort of preset options to choose from, and has more of like a user interface that their leads are going through. So I think one thing is it just immediately solved a problem, which is we don't generate quotes fast enough, and it also takes away time from us producing videos, which is what we love to do. And then it also seems like it's kind of sparked these bigger ideas about how we could build on this system. So people have started with just the simple email version because it's something they can just get privately and do whatever they want with. But then some people have asked, like, oh, can we just put this into a proposal that I present to them on the call? Yes, you can put this into something like PandaDoc or even Google Docs or, you know, Adobe Sign or whatnot. And so it's helped them think from the very beginning of, I have a real genuine lead, submit this form on my site, or you know, I fill it out in a sales call. They kind of started thinking about like what happens after that moment and how could we continue automating. And what I like about this is that it's a big enough chunk to bite off that it really saves them time, but it's also not so big that they're trying to automate their whole marketing and sales process like end to end. So I think it's a good size chunk to start with.
I love that. Thank you so much, Laura, for presenting all of that. So I know we only have a few minutes left, so I want to thank all of our presenters today. I noticed someone here in the chat saying that they loved how they were all so different. I agree. I hope everyone's feeling nice and inspired about what's possible. I did go ahead and I left our AIX feedback form here in the chat. So if you enjoyed the session, or even if you have ideas on what you would like to see in the future, or if for some reason you didn't love the session, we are hungry for feedback. So feel free to always comment your thoughts there. We really do read every single one of those to try to find out how we can keep shaping this membership to be exactly what you need. Does anyone have any, we have 6 minutes, any last closing thoughts or takeaways or anything they're feeling inspired to share with the group? I see some thinking. So it was wonderful. Thank you for the presenters. Love it. Great session. Awesome. Well, I'm glad everyone had a great time then. Otherwise, we will follow up with you guys in Slack. I hope everyone has a really lovely weekend. Bye, everyone.